Hi, this video is an overview of how to structure an essay effectively by building a line of reasoning. A line of reasoning means that each body paragraph builds on the one before it so that your body paragraphs ultimately all work together to support your thesis. So if you look at the visual that I put on the left-hand side of this slide, I think this does a pretty good job of showing what a line of reasoning looks like. So in your introduction, you propose your thesis, right? You state what you are going to prove in the essay. Then in your first body paragraph, you should be proving that first logical step that you'll need to prove to prove your thesis overall. So you are not trying to prove your entire thesis in your first body paragraph, because then you have nothing else to do in the rest of your body paragraphs. So you are zeroing in on the first thing that you need to prove to your readers if you're going to ultimately prove that your thesis is true. And then you're going to build on that in your second body paragraph, your third, your fourth, etc., as many body paragraphs as you need until you get to a point where you say, yeah, I have proven my entire thesis. And then you can, then you write your conclusion, in which you restate that thesis, clarify how you've proven it, and you are done with your essay. One thing to note when you're building a line of reasoning is that your earlier paragraphs are generally going to be more straightforward than your later paragraphs, because that earlier first step of logic is going to be probably fairly simple. And then your discussion analysis gets more complex once you've gotten through more steps of logic. One easy way to think about this might be an essay about a character who changes over the course of a novel, where your first body paragraph would be what the character is like when they're first introduced to us. And that might be pretty simple, because at that point, you're just getting a character in one moment of time. And then your next body paragraph is analyzing how they change in the first half of the book. And then your next body paragraph is how they change a little bit later. And then each body paragraph is getting more complex, because you're now comparing, well, they've changed in this way, because remember in body paragraph 1, they were like this, and then they were like this, and here's why they changed, right? And you're getting more complex and building that excellent argument more as you go throughout your essay. So we're going to look at an example essay outline for an essay on Liliana Hecker's short story, The Stolen Party. And my thesis is, by not explicitly asking Rosara to act as the maid, Senor Inés tries to be kind to Rosara, but unknowingly harms her by contributing to her misunderstanding. So I see this thesis as looking at two different things. So one is Senora Inés's actions and their consequences, and then the other is Rosara's misunderstanding. So if you look at the orange section, that's about Senora Inés. So Senora Inés tries to be kind to Rosara, but unknowingly harms her. One thing I need to prove. And then the other thing that I need to prove is that Rosara has this misunderstanding, right? And then obviously the connection between those parts. So in my first topic sentence, I wrote, the first page of the story foreshadows Rosara's misunderstanding with an argument between Rosara and her mother. So in this essay, this paragraph is the simplest assertion that I make, because I'm not even talking about Senora Inés yet. I'm just focusing on the very beginning of the story and how Rosara's misunderstanding is set up at that point. And then in my next paragraph, I'm going to bring in Senora Inés. So the second topic sentence is, once Rosara arrives at the party, she becomes certain that she was correct, partially because of how kind Senora Inés is to her. So this paragraph is doing a couple things. So it's building on Rosara's misunderstanding from paragraph 1 by saying, well, she was misunderstanding things in the first paragraph, and now, well, she becomes certain that she was right. She's misunderstanding things even more deeply. And then I add in Senora Inés by saying, well, that happens partially because of how kind Senora Inés is to her. Then in my last body paragraph, this is going to be my most complex paragraph. I'm building on what came before it again. So my kind of building piece at the beginning here is, after being made to feel special throughout the party, right? So I'm saying we're building on the fact that she's felt special the whole time. Rosara is devastated when Senor Ines tries to pay her. The party is instantly reframed from a wonderful experience to a humiliating one. So now I've gotten to that other thing that Senor Ines does, right? The unknowing harm. And I've also kind of finalized my discussion of Rosara's misunderstanding by showing that when she figures out she's misunderstood, the entire party is reframed from being wonderful to being terrible. So now I've proven my whole thesis, right? I've shown Senor Ines tries to be kind to Rosara. That showed up in my second paragraph, or my second body paragraph, but unknowingly harms her. That showed up in my third body paragraph, and the piece about Rosara's misunderstanding showed up in every paragraph. So I feel like I've brought this essay to its logical conclusion. So I would write my conclusion, and this conclusion, or beginning of the conclusion paragraph, is: it is undeniably Senor Ines who has stolen the party from Rosara in its final moments. Her attempt to pay Rosara has an obvious negative impact, and yet Senor Ines's intentions are benevolent. Those two sentences together pretty much restate that thesis, get at that main idea. Here's what I've proven. And then as the next step in my conclusion, I'm going to push it a little bit further and kind of analyze like why it matters, and I'm going to get to themes. So then the last sentence is: the real test of our character is what happens after the moment when the story ends. And I go on to discuss the difference between intent and impact, and how we can hurt other people without meaning to, but need to fix it, etc. Sorry, not super important to structure. But you can see how each paragraph builds on the one before it to build that nice line of reasoning. I also just want to show you one more way of just looking at what I have in the topic sentences. So we already talked about how each paragraph is making an assertion that supports part of the topic sentence, and they build on each other. Also just want to talk about topic sentences also as defining the focus of each paragraph and as transitioning. So it's important that each of your paragraphs is proving something unique, that there's not like overlap between them. And one way to do that is to focus on what it is that you're discussing in the story. So here in green for defining the focus, first paragraph, the first page of the story. Second paragraph, once Rosara arrives at the party. Third paragraph, when Senor Ines tries to pay her, right? So it's really clear that each paragraph, or what part of the story each paragraph is focused on, and that there's no overlap between them. So that's going to help me too. If I'm gathering evidence and putting them into paragraphs, that's going to help me know exactly where they belong, so I don't end up confusing anyone. And then the other thing that topic sentences do is transition. And I talked about that a little bit throughout, but showing how each paragraph is building on the one before it. There's not a transition in the first topic sentence because that's my first step of logic, but then my next two topic sentences do have that transition to indicate where I'm at in my logic and how I'm building that line of reasoning. All right, thanks for listening.